good afternoon, good noon, you don't say that, good morning, somewhere in between. I'm Thomas Marckx, I'm one of the founders and I'm also a blockchain architect of the Ledger. And my companion, who's now being transformed into a cyborg, is Karsten Flierman. He's our business manager or business development manager here in the Netherlands. So who are we? So we're not a product company compared to a lot of other companies that are here today. We help companies and consortiums and governments to go from a concept, how do you build something with blockchain technology, to a prototype, and then how can we put this safely into production. Apart from that, we also do trainings, and we also help. All those things are on permissioned private blockchains we do. On public blockchains, we actually do only ICOs or token sales, contracts we write. And we also have a service for smart contract auditing, how to make sure that your contracts are safe and no re-entrants are possible, and so on and so on. We're gonna talk too much about ourselves. So blockchain, a very quick question. For whom is it still Chinese? I hope for no one, otherwise this is going to be a very difficult talk. No, it won't be difficult. But for many people, it still is. And you still encounter the following question or the following statement: a blockchain is a solution in search of a problem. Now, I hope nobody agrees with that. But the reason why that is mostly because people don't understand blockchain, and that's fine. But they actually don't understand how ledgers or even shared ledgers work, and why they work, and why we need them in our society. So what is a ledger? I hope I won't bore you with that, but it's a book, it's a list collecting chronologically transactional data. In other words, you have an entire history of what has happened to a certain asset, mostly only when it was in your possession, and you can also deduct the current state of it, meaning how many assets do I have, what have happened with them, what's their value. Very often, mostly ledgers are used for financial transactions, but you can imagine you can do it with a lot more and more. The question is, who can view this information and who can make changes? So there's a single ledger, this gives some problems. And why is that? Well, if you give someone the authority over a single ledger, you have to trust this third party. And that's the issue. What is trust, and how do we go from a single ledger to a shared trustworthy ledger? Well, very simple, we make it immutable, and that's where the blockchain comes in. And then we're going to distribute it, and that's where our blockchain network comes in. So you have an entire list that is cryptographically linked so nobody can alter the transactions, and by distributing it, you suddenly have a majority of people who have the same perception of the truth, or who have the same version of this current ledger, or this current blockchain, however you want to call it. The clicker broke. But of course the question is mostly, and that's why we're on the business stage, not the technology stage, is how can they solve things? What can be a solution with this technology that we haven't solved in the past? And very few things can be solved, well, how do you put it? A lot of things can be solved with central databases, and a few can be solved a lot better with blockchain technology. It's a question on how will blockchain technology or shared ledger technology change how we interact with each other. Now I'm going to become a little bit philosophically, is how do we currently interact with the world? That's quite simple. What we all have, we have inputs of our senses. That's very simple. We have also a little bit of brain power, so we are able to get a certain vision on what happened in the past. And luckily, we all have some rules that we agreed on, and we trust that everybody agrees on them, so we can form a projection of the reality and of the short-term future. To put it very simply, everybody here in this audience assumes, and in this building, and hopefully in this country, assumes that the human rights are something that is very important and that is correct. You can't kill nobody else, and everybody has that perception of the reality that we shouldn't do that. Luckily, because if there is a person of that who disagrees with that in this room, we have to slam him to death, because otherwise he might attack us. So that's the way we form a projection of reality. We have a perception of reality. And how do we view that in time? Well, we think we know what happened in the past, but what we actually have is a projection of what happened in the past at this very moment. And you have that very often if you disagree with your wife or your husband. You both remember the past differently, right? You have a different perception of it. The same way how you currently are interacting or perceiving the present. Well, everybody's seeing or looking at me. Some people are looking at their cell phones, that's fine. But you have a different perception on how the present is happening. Same with the future. Everybody agrees the chances are very slim that an airplane will fall down on this building. but not everybody is sure that the lunch will be eatable. Well, I hope so. And how have we constructed order along all our different civilians in the past? How do we did that? Because everybody has their own perception. Well, we had some ideologies for that, some religion, we had laws for that, and mostly to incentivize people, we got markets. You trust people because you assume they have certain similar world vision as you, and you trust markets that incentivize you to work together. All these things have been created to create trust. Now, how can you view blockchain technology or shared ledger technology in that vision? It's mostly, what if everybody has the same perception of what happened in the past? Meaning everybody has a record of actions, of facts that happened, and is distributed. So you're actually sure that indeed, I've written down that I've sent a shipment of 20 horses to the gentleman here in front, and I'm absolutely sure that not only he, but everybody else has the same view on this information. Right? That's super, because there's no doubt anymore on how can we disagree the different perception of what happened in the past. It happens in reality, the inputs we get, how do we know that there's not coming any trash in, trash out, garbage in, garbage out? It's, I think everybody's heard of the oracle problem. How are we absolutely sure that we get correct information on our blockchain network? That's why we are creating oracles for that, and not we only, but not in the community. Trustworthy devices, sensors, IoT sensors, but also authority persons, for example, a notary, who will still have a certain job to do to make sure that indeed this happened in reality, I vouch for it, and I put it on chain. You can go completely public with some kind of reputation system. That's not something that will happen, I think, in the short term. Okay, we have an agreement on what happened in the past and how we're going to process the inputs. How do you know what will happen in the short-term future? That's where the smart contracts come in. You have different parties agreeing on certain rules, and they're being forced on everybody by the code itself that they'd agreed on. And nobody can change it thanks to the blockchain itself around it. So you get suddenly an entire group of people who have the same view of reality. So that's another picture for that. And that's what makes it so powerful. I think a lot of here on this conference is being talked about cryptos and how public blockchain can help for the rest of the world. But you see, mostly they're all linked to a certain form of token economy. And I think, and we think, we can go a lot further with that. Because you don't want to have an entire public ledger that might be sometimes slow for the type of use case you want to apply on it. You also want to create some kind of enterprise permissioned ledgers between multiple parties that interact with each other and are certain that they can automate things, not by a centralized system, but by an entire network that backs it. And this can be a private network, there's nothing wrong with that. You have certain rules in your home that you agreed on with your partner and with your children, but they're not being forced on the neighbor, unless you live in a very strange neighborhood, that's possible. And that's quite similar. How do you automate these things? Decentralized. I like to get away from confusion because blockchain is used for everything. And what a blockchain really is, or a shared ledger, it's a mechanism to draw facts in an auditable way, meaning everything you store on chain gets distributed and everybody gets the same record. And you can check it, you're 100% sure that everybody has the same information. So it's not really data that you're storing facts. That's another way to look at it. And it gives you some different ideas on how you can create business cases for it. The word blockchain, I'm starting to hate it a little bit, because what is it? Some people say it's the fact that you no longer need a third party. No, we call that trust. If you don't need someone to chaperone or to look and check those things that you're doing, you trust the other party. They say it's a network, and we're going to throw it on the blockchain. Well, there are many networks, and that's actually what we call a shared ledger. That's what it is. It's a ledger shared between people. Sometimes they say it's technology that we're using for it. We're going to solve this by using blockchain. But what do you mean? Which technology? So there's a shared ledger technology for that. The real blockchain is just the fact that it's a ledger that's immutable by storing all your transactions in blocks that are cryptographically linked. That's the only thing that's a blockchain, and that's the difference with the shared ledger. What do I mean by that? How you build a shared ledger could be a blockchain. It could be indeed that everybody in the network has a complete copy of this entire chain, this entire ledger. But it can be distributed. For example, if you want to scale massively with it and you should store a lot of data, Well, mostly you won't say that everybody gets a complete copy of it because your data becomes redundant and quite large. What you will say is everybody gets a small piece of it. You distribute it on a big data database that you can scale up if you need to store more information on it. Or you can go even to a further thing and say, we don't need to have it like a chain. It can be a tree structure where some groups inside the network own different branches of this tree. IOTA is an example of this, for example. So what about the future? Why is it important? I think don't think about the technology. Think about the fact if you can create processes or improve processes between multiple parties, well, then you need less or fewer physical agents of trust. If only something needs to be checked only once, instead needs to be rechecked by every party because they trust each other enough to work together, but they trust the checks based on blockchain technology that's being used behind the scene, well, it's a lot less work that needs to happen. So I think that's clear for everybody. But what is even greater, the potential behind it, well, if you suddenly are able to automate things directly on your network, and you can create devices that have part of their software, for example, a self-driving car has part of their software in a smart contract, which can't be changed afterwards, well, then you can create new economical agents. You will no longer only communicate human to human, but human to machine and machine to machine. And the moment you stop thinking that all the work needs to be done by humans, or by humans controlling machines, but machines completely conscious on their own, then you can go into cool things. So this is a slide that I borrowed from Tim Grant. He's a very cool guy who's doing a lot of things with shared ledgers. If you viewed in the past, everything was one-to-one transactions, one-to-one interactions. With the internet, suddenly we were able to communicate with the rest of the world with the press of a button. With shared ledger technology and blockchain, suddenly we're not only able to keep communicating like we did, but we're able to make sure that everybody has the same truth, same facts. That everybody views that something has happened that they're absolutely certain hasn't been changed. And viewed next to smart contracts, well, these shared ledgers, we can now work together and know that everybody is being forced what they agreed upon with the same rules. So you still have to work together and the collaboration is still hard. But the moment you agree on something, it gets executed and you're sure that nobody can alter it anymore. So how do we build this future? That's what Karsten is going to explain.
Yes.
Otherwise, he was just here for
well, it's
furniture.
It's good to know it's still early day, right? The technology is constantly evolving, and that's something to keep in mind when you start up a blockchain initiative. That the technology is still young and constantly evolving, and that's not the only case. It's important to keep that in mind because you can't reboot a blockchain, right? Another thing is that regulation is also constantly evolving. At the end of this month, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is initiated, and when it comes out, it's already outdated. If it's about innovative, disruptive technology like blockchain, because the GDPR says we all have the right to be forgotten, but blockchain is immutable, right? So also you have to keep in mind with the blockchain initiative that also regulation is constantly evolving. And another important thing to keep in mind with the blockchain initiative is governance, because blockchain is all about collaboration, it's all about cooperation, it's all about co-creation. You always have different stakeholders with different things at stake. Well, and what we keep in mind, we have a method to go from concept to prototype to production. That blockchain technology never stands on its own. It's always an application in a certain business, in a certain market. So we try to have, we have expertise on blockchain technology, or better said, shared ledger technology. But our partners and customers, they have domain expertise. So a blockchain initiative really should be a collaboration between us as a technology partner and you as a domain expert. So another way to say it is think, build, and deliver. And one of the most important questions is it a use case? Do we really have a blockchain use case? Because nowadays I sometimes get the feeling that there will be a day that Miss Universe would say that her most sincere wish is a bling bling blockchain for everyone, added to world peace. But it's an important question to determine if is it really a blockchain use case. We have a method and we ask 3 questions. The first is, are there multiple stakeholders? And is there, because blockchain is all about collaboration, cooperation, co-creation, is there mutual benefit for them to collaborate? And if so, because there are multiple stakeholders, there are different things at stake, there needs to be a certain measure of distrust. Well, if you give an answer to that question and it's yes, you might have a blockchain use case. Well, second question, do those different stakeholders have a need for a single source of truth? In order to leverage upon that mutual benefits, do they need a single source of truth? Do they need shared data? Do they need shared information? If the answer on that question is yes, you might have a blockchain use case. And the third question is, now we have a shared data, shared information, we have a shared single source of truth, but do we also need a shared single source of rules? Do we also need a shared single source of business rules? And if the answer to that question is also yes, I think you have a good blockchain use case. So it's really important to think about the stakeholders, because the users of your blockchain application, it doesn't necessarily have to be the people who also are the ones that host the blockchain network, that host the nodes, that sustain the blockchain network. And the ones who sustain the blockchain network doesn't necessarily have to be the people who determine the rules on the blockchain. So getting insight in your stakeholders is really important for a blockchain initiative. And together, because blockchain is all about collaboration, cooperation, and co-creation, together we determine the requirements for a good blockchain use case. Well, in the build phase, we really have a build fast philosophy, because that's also, you see some on this conference, you can talk for hours about the promise of blockchain. But our experience is that you need to build fast. We have a methodology where we have sprints of 2 weeks, and we have the experience that when you try to apply blockchain technology on a real life case, then you get in a situation where you get really hands-on knowledge, really hands-on experience on what the application, what will be a good application of blockchain technology for a real life solution. So what's important? We've done several things. We created digital tokens. We helped with a couple of ICOs. We developed smart contracts. One thing we also do, as part of our professional services portfolio, is smart contract auditing, because of the fact you can't reboot a blockchain, it's important to have good quality code deployed on it, right? So that's also something we do, smart contract auditing. And as our philosophy is build fast, we really want, after a couple of sprints, give our partners and customers a sandbox environment to get in which they can play hands-on with the evolving prototype. And because blockchain technology, a blockchain solution never stands on itself, there's always, you always need to integrate with existing systems. So integration will always be also a part of a blockchain project. And in the end, you want a nice and fancy front end. So, and after that, we can take the blockchain application in production, and then we have to think together about the next steps, like forming a consortium. Well, there are technologies everywhere. And like Thomas explained, there's not something like the blockchain. And these are some of the technologies we used in the projects I talked about. But when are you blockchain ready? And maybe you have a complex situation with multiple departments, multiple functionalities you want to see in your blockchain application. But as our philosophy is build fast, we also have the philosophy start small. Start with one department or maybe 2 small departments. Spin up a few nodes. Start small, because we want to build fast. So start small. And in a nutshell, you can say, start small and increase decentralization. So when you have multiple functionalities you want to see back in your blockchain application, we also say start small, start with some function, start with that one killer function. And later on you can, like a simple application like simple asset registration, for example. And later on you can add more complex smart contracts, and that's what we call it in a nutshell. Along the way we can increase automation. Well, we have different approaches. I already said that governance is a really important factor of a blockchain initiative. And you can start on a public blockchain like Ethereum. And what you can do is create a dApp. It's a distributed application, and put it, develop the smart contracts needed for it, and put it on the blockchain, the public blockchain like Ethereum. And that's what we call using existing trust. Because you are using the existing trust network like Ethereum. But another approach would be a more enterprise-like approach. And that's what we call the more pure approach, because you don't start with one innovator or one innovative company or one innovative idea. You really start in the spirit of blockchain. And the spirit of blockchain is, again, collaboration, co-creation, cooperation. Dus together with a group of stakeholders with different things at stake, you form a consortium around a certain business case which is mutual beneficial for all the stakeholders. You build a pure consortium. Together you build a blockchain network. On that blockchain network you build your blockchain application. And that's what we call, in a nutshell, first we had use existing trust, and now we are creating trust. Well, another approach in the enterprise space is we often determine that it's quite hard to get all the stakeholders aligned, or to get all the stakeholders around the table, or to form a consortium. But you are that innovator. You are that innovative company. You have that great innovative idea. Then you still can start on your own. Find a service in a certain sector where there is distrust or doubt. Build your application, build your blockchain network, and also add a software as a service layer around it. Because this gives the opportunity to another partner to build their blockchain application on your blockchain network. They even can choose to spin up some nodes themselves. Or you can onboard another partner who want to build their blockchain application on your blockchain network, also spin up a few nodes, and together sustaining the blockchain network. But they also can add to the software as a service layer. They can also add their own hosting layer to it. And before you know it, together you are sustaining a blockchain network, and you can talk about next steps like forming a consortium together. So governance is really an important thing if you think about a blockchain initiative. And how will updates occur in the consortium? How will a new partner join? Who will maintain the ledger? Because the one who hosts the nodes are not necessarily the ones who have to make the rules, or are the users of the blockchain application. Who will host the infrastructure? And in a nutshell, how to collaborate. And this is a quote we really like. Your relevance starts when you're solving people's problems. So I want to discuss a real life project we've done. A blockchain project we called the COMPETENCE Pass. And it was in a collaboration, because blockchain is all about collaboration, with two organizations. One is VDIB. It's a public employment service of the Flemish government. And also organization, it's a public educational service for equal opportunities. That's Go. And they set a few goals for that project. And they wanted to create an HR platform with cross-company competencies. And one of the goals was that competencies need to be registered in a safe manner, because I think we all agree that competences is privacy-sensitive data, right? It's privacy-sensitive information. I mean, the ownership had to remain with the individual. Yeah, I think we all have the Facebook scandal in mind, but your competences, that's your data. It's your information. You want to be the one that decides who gets to see it and for how long. And we wanted to create a platform which can use existing standards, because I already said you can't reboot a blockchain. So you don't want to start all over again if a new standard pops up. And I can tell you, if it's about standards concerning competencies, there are a lot of competence standards. So we needed to make a bridge between the different standards. So what we've done, this is Tom de Wit. Tom de Wit sounds a little bit strange. It's a Dutch name. Let's call him Tommy White. Tom has quit his education and didn't graduate, so he doesn't have a diploma. But luckily, that organization, GO, the Public Educational Service, registered his achieved learning goals in their platform. And it's interesting to know that only in 2016, there are almost 6,000 high school dropouts in Belgium, of which almost 35% were job seekers. And at the moment now in Belgium, there are 20,000 high school dropouts. So this is really an interesting use case to solve, right? Because personally, I'm a strong believer in second chances. Everybody, sometimes we failed a training or didn't finish our education or got fired at a job or screwed up a project. So I'm a strong believer in second chances. And that's a nice characteristic of blockchain technology. Don Tapscott says that one of the strong blockchain characteristics is inclusion. And so in old ecosystems, you're easily excluded, but blockchain has the power to include people. And because Tommy didn't graduate, but he has got skills, right? He's gifted. He has competencies. So this is what we've done. GO, the Public Educational Service, registered the achieved learning goals of Tommy on the blockchain. And later on, the VDAB, the Public Employment Service, also hooked on the blockchain, and they added their own standard. And because a school talks about learning goals or achieved learning goals, but an organization like VDAB, a Public Employment Service, talks about competencies. So they added their own standard on the blockchain, made the mapping with the existing standard on the blockchain of the school, and from that moment on, an employee of VDAB, when he was looking at the profile of Tommy, he saw the achieved learning goals of Tommy at his school now in their own standard, and in their own existing competence standard they used. So we created a solution which made it possible for another later moment for another organization with their own competence standard to also onboard our blockchain technology, deploy their own competence standard, map it on the existing standards on the blockchain, and from that moment on, they can view the profile of Tommy in their own competence standard. So it's really an interesting use case. Now my colleague is going to talk about the rise of the conscious houses.
Yes, as Karsten mentioned, on the one hand, blockchain gives you the opportunity to create, well, trustworthy or fact-keeping records for an individual, like the competences. But on the other hand, I also talked about the fact that we are able to automate things directly on chain. And what we did here was we joined, it's a month ago, I think, in Groningen, the Blockchangers Hackathon, to create a housing passport where every action happened to the house is stored on chain, that only the owner of the house can view and mandate and modify. Not modify, mandate, of course, who can view it. And also, apart from that, make it possible that the house has its own wallet, that certain decisions the house would or could be able to decide on its own. What is it? All the historical modifications to a house have been stored there. The identity of who made these modifications, namely contractors, was taken out of the Chamber of Commerce, so a link to that, so you know for certain that 10 years ago, indeed, it was that firm who installed solar panels on your roof. We also created a portal for the government to issue subsidies, specifically, for example, they say, oh, in this region, there's not a lot of isolation in the houses, let's give them some subsidies. The houses, the AI behind the houses, which is a very small AI we built, so that's not really a real AI, just some if then else things, can say, oh, I don't have that many isolations, perhaps this is a good idea to install those things. And then, afterwards, we also created a reverse bidding market that say the house would publish a reverse offer saying, I need someone to install for 30 square meters isolation in this house without saying which price. And contractors were able to bid on it. If the bid was below a certain threshold, the house could say, okay, you can come and do it. And afterwards, the works were done. We got an instant payment of it, and we used Stellar for that. So this is what we did. For example, this would be a view board. Behind it, there was Hyperledger Fabric as being used as blockchain technology with the smart contract capabilities written in this case, in JavaScript we made it. Where you could see, indeed, what's the wallet of your house. There's Stellar behind it, which we communicated to euros. Also, which upgrades are being in progress, and if they are being done, that the owner can say, oh, indeed, yeah, I now have solar panels done, so the payments can happen. There's a history of everything that happened to your house, and also an overview of which might be new opportunities, new subsidies being created by the government. Other information like my house, we'll get some extra information out of the cadastre. What do you say, the cadastre? Cadastre. And there's a nice tree to see how energy efficient is your house at this moment. This is just a small, I won't go into detail, how we made it. So what we're doing actually, and Karsten already mentioned that, the ledger itself, we're a technology agnostic company. So we use multiple technologies and we also combine them. So Stellar is a payment blockchain platform. Hyperledger Fabric is a platform to create permissioned enterprise blockchain solutions. So we combine those. This is a nice team, our team who won the hackathon there. And we'd like to end this talk, as Karsten already mentioned this. If you have an idea, want to do something with blockchain, well, think about all different possibilities there are. You can create a dApp on a public blockchain. You might first go and get a consortium together, or you can say, I'm going to build it already on our own, in our own company, and we're going to license it or sell it to other parties. And say, when you use our application, oh yeah, by the way, here are also some nodes that you can install so our decentralization gets bigger and the trust gets more and more increased. Or we can host it for you, so other business opportunities are being able there as well. So think big, but start small. And the idea that we have is prototype, fail fast and fail forward. The more you fail, the more you learn, the better you get a product at the end. So I hope now we can collaborate with everybody. And this is just an overview of all the projects that we've done, and also how you can find us, talk to us. So if you want to come and drink a very fancy coffee, we have offices in Belgium and the Netherlands, here in Antwerp, Amsterdam, but also in Antwerp in Belgium. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. That was great. I'm going to say, come on down, and then people can grab you individually and kind of find out more if they need to, yeah? So appreciate it. And these guys are here. You have a stand, don't you?
Yeah, we have a stand in the hall with where it sits the ledger. That's us.
Come find them. So awesome. Well done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.